Hey guys, in this video I'm going to be building the AMT3000 low power AM broadcast kit. I have gone through the instructions briefly and looked through the parts. Seems fairly straightforward. In here we've got the case, some nice printing on there for the various controls and inputs and so on. Some wire, which I think is for the ground and an antenna. Here we got a little bag of coils. Here's a bag of heatsink knobs and headers and feet and miscellaneous bits. Here's the main circuit board, double-sided. One surface mount component that's pre-soldered, so you don't have to deal with that, which is nice. The rest are all through-hole components. Let's see, here's the resistors. Here are input-output jacks and controls, capacitors, semiconductors, integrated circuits, and the AC power adapter. Briefly, here's how this works as near as I could glean just from the schematic. Starts out with a 4 megahertz crystal oscillator, and this whole block up here is a phase lock loop where you can set the broadcast frequency with the dip switch here. The lower section here takes your audio input and then has a preamp with variable compression, which goes through and controls the gain on the output transistors here, and that modulates it. In other words, this generates the RF and this generates a modulating signal, and then here's the output amp, and then here is a network to go to the antenna outputs. They break this down into quite a bit of detail as far as the construction goes. Tell you all the tools you will need, and they go into a lot of detail about each component. Not only telling you, for example, that R8 is 22 ohms, but they tell you the color is red, red, black, and so on. So you can actually, you don't even have to know how to read the color code on resistors. They spell it out in pretty good detail. Same with the capacitors and so on. And they give you all these check boxes so you can go through all your parts and verify that you've got them all. And then later on, they talk about installing them, and there's another checklist. Here's the key to it. It's the circuit board with all the parts labeled. I imagine there's silk screen on the board too. Yeah, there's designators on the board for all the parts too. So you can cross-reference. For example, see there's R11 and R12, and you can look on the parts list, see what values those are, find them in the parts bags, and solder them in. They even give you some tips on how to solder in here. And here's the construction checklist. So I'm just going to quickly start going through this. Start out right here with R8, 22 ohms, and check off each component as you install them. Alright, so I'm going to clear off an area to work on this. And the first thing I'm going to do after that is change out my soldering iron tip. Right now I've got kind of a grungy spade tip on there that I've been using while working on old TVs. I'm going to change it out for one with a small conical tip. I also drop the wattage down. Right now I've got it cranked up all the way on my Weller WES51. I think the maximum output's something like 65 watts. I'll cut it down to maybe a half or 2/3 of the max output. You just don't need that much power to solder these little pads here. Okay, so first up, R8, 22 ohms. So somewhere in here should be 22 ohm resistor. There we go. And now you need to find R8 on the silk screening. And okay, it's right over here. So I'll need to bend my leads over. Pop it in. So I'll bend them over a little bit on the other side and solder it in place. Nice clean tip. And I've got some .031 diameter rosin core solder. Touch this one up a little bit because it wiggled as I pulled the iron away. Alright, and then I've got these nice little flush cutters here. And there we go. R8 is done. Check that off. And so on. Looks like I've got about 30 resistors to install, so I'll get to it. Alright, I got all the resistors done. None were missing, none left over. It's a good sign, I figure. Now we move on to the chokes. First up, 56 microhenry, green, blue, black, gold. Which would be this guy. Camera will focus on it. Maybe not. Let's see. L4. There we go. Right in there. After a while doing the resistors, I started putting in 4, 5, maybe 6 at a time, and then soldering them in. Seem to go a bit faster. So I'll do the same with these. 82 microhenry. It's L5. 4 of these inductors I'll go right next to each other, L4, 5, 6, 7, so we'll do all 4 of those at once. L6 is 180. Oh, okay, maybe it's this guy. Yeah. Got worried there for a second. I couldn't find a 180, but it's still in the bag. Bit different looking than the others. It's smaller and blue rather than sort of an off-white. Let's see, L6. Goes right there. L7 is 470. What's this guy? I'll solder those in place. If you never soldered before, key to remember is you don't apply the solder directly to the tip of the soldering iron. You put the soldering iron on one side of the joint and you apply the solder to the other side of the lead, and the heat will draw it over. Sometimes you got to put a little dab on the tip to kind of wet it, to get the thermal conduction flowing. I finished with the rest of the inductors, and then I went ahead and did all the diodes, and I just finished installing the resistor network. And now I'm moving on to the integrated circuits. They're all socketed, which is nice, so I don't have to worry about overheating the ICs or zapping them. With static electricity, I mean. It's very humid right now with the remains of Isaac blowing through Chicago, so I'm really not worried about any static issues. If it was really dry and there was a lot of static in the air, I might want to ground myself or use a conductive pad while I'm working on this. And as far as the sockets go, you just look for the little U-type indicator on there, and that corresponds to the notch in the socket, like that. And so on. There are 4 of them in total. So I went ahead and installed the rest of the components, the controls, the input jacks, and so on. I'm at the stage now where I can install the integrated circuits into the sockets and then start assembling the cabinet, which is clamshell of plastic. Put the board in, it mounts through 4 holes, 1 in each corner, and top goes on like so, or rather the bottom. I guess I have this upside down. And there are also these panels, like so, one for the front, one for the back with labels. I popped in the ICs and then temporarily screwed the board down to the bottom of the case, and I've hooked up an audio source. It's just an old DVD player playing a CD through the left and right input channels, and I've plugged in the antenna, which is really just 2 long pieces of wire, and as they say, for the initial power-up test, I just have them kind of dangling off into space and not actually connected to ground or anything. And that's it. Oh, and the AC adapter, which I'll plug in right now. If all goes well. Alright, that came on. I just hear my radio do something briefly. I've got my little Admiral radio here tuned to a dead spot. It's about at AM 650. Alright, so setting the frequency. There's a chart in the back. It translates the binary positions on the switch to frequencies. 650 is on, off. Well, that's pretty convenient. They're just all on except for on. I think I just blew right by the frequency because I heard it on the radio briefly. So off would be position 7, so just this one guy here. And there it is. Well, that was easy. Now there are still some steps to do with tuning and so on. And if you're wondering what I'm playing, this is my friend's band from back in the day, and I'm actually listed in the credits inside, so Google better not complain about any copyright violations on it. Yeah, so let's go back to the setting the frequency. Okay, we've got that. Range peaking the RF power. Now I'm following the instructions for peaking the RF output. You hook up a high impedance meter to test points T1 and T2. By high impedance, I mean about a 10 mega ohm impedance. I'm using my Hewlett-Packard 410C VTVM for this. And what you're adjusting is this trimmer capacitor here. I'm using an alignment tool so my body doesn't affect the capacitor like it might if I had a metal screwdriver. And simply tweak this capacitor for maximum reading. Now, as they say in the manual, I do find 2 peaks. There are 2 points on this capacitor where I get a peak. They say choose either one, it really doesn't matter. So I will go for this one, which is right about there. Alright, that's about it. The rest they go through with adjusting the controls. But I think these are basically all just kind of do it by ear so it sounds good to you. You know, like with modulation, they say increase it until it begins to distort from overmodulation and then back off. And so on. Alright, so I'm going to continue to tweak this a little bit, and then I want to try putting it into my office because I'm not actually going to keep this up on my workbench. So being able to receive from a transmitter about 4 feet away from the radio is not that impressive. I'm going to put this in my office, which is, I don't know, 40 feet or so away from my workshop, and see how that works out. I've got the SSTRAN set up in my office on top of this little TV. I found an 1/8-inch stereo plug to RCA jack adapter, and I've got that plugged in, and I've got it turned on. Now, as far as what I'm going to be listening or transmitting with this, well, probably a little bit of anything and everything. For sure, some podcasts. For example, I just pulled up the Solder Smoke page. It's a podcast about, ham radio and other various homebrew projects and topics. I haven't listened to it in quite a while, but
welcome to Solder Smoke.
Now that I can broadcast it,
wireless technology. We talk about everything from
old-time crystal
radios to modern digital satellites. All are welcome. Please join us in the Solder Smoke.
So here it is, broadcasting about 6 feet from the transmitter. Now I'll go back into my workshop and see how it sounds.
This is Solder Smoke 145. Here she said, "Oh man, this poor dog is gonna die from the heat." So she took him to the.
Okay, it's pretty noisy. Got a lot of buzzing, but a few hours have elapsed now, and it's in the evening. And this is typically when things get noisier on the lower end of the AM band, regardless. So I'm gonna try to find a quiet spot up higher on a dial, like maybe around 11 or 1200 in there, and see how that works out.
Of the QRP Hall of Fame. Congratulations to him and to the others who...
I switched up to 1340 AM. It's working much better.
Lately, I've been listening a lot.
And I still haven't even gone back through and re-peaked the RF stage, which I assume I'm going to have to do since I changed the frequency. But either way, much better.
Joe N2CX have got this.
And this is one of my cheaper radios too. It's not exactly a high-performing set. So how about I fire up another set now? See how that sounds.
That they're putting out all kinds of topics. I put it on my MP.
I found a website online that has royalty-free music, so I pulled up some Beethoven, which I'm playing now, and I played around a little bit with the compression and modulation levels and so on, and I think it sounds pretty darn good. Oh, this is my Foco 3930 I restored a while ago. There's various tone settings here. yeah, I'd certainly call this project a success. Now, if you're wondering why aren't I playing the Brunswick 5KR that I just restored, well, it's because I got it up on a shelf right now and I can't easily plug it in or hook up the speaker. It's a big, heavy beast, and I'm not quite sure where to put it yet, so maybe some other day I'll fire that set up with this transmitter. So for the setup I settled on, I'm on AM1340, and the antenna, instead of lying on the ground, I now have snaking up and kind of tucked in between some boxes up on my top shelf up there. And the ground is just hanging off into free space, not going to anything. I actually did try connecting it to the ground terminal on an outlet, and it introduces a lot of hum. They go into a lot of options in the manual here about ways to ground it. Oh, and then there's the Brunswick 5KR. So you can see I've got it up on a shelf here. And I suppose I could put the speaker up maybe there and put that Philco Hippo somewhere else. But there's no power outlet right here, so that's what I was saying. It's not quite so easy to hook up right now. But it's a nice safe place to keep it out of harm's way. That's why I put it there. Alright, so anyways, in conclusion, I know it costs a few bucks, but it worked first time I tried powering it up. It sounds great, fairly easy to build, and rather well made, I'd say. So I definitely recommend this kit, and I hope you guys enjoyed this video on constructing an AMT3000 AM transmitter.